Picture this. You're on a date, a really important date, with one of the most beautiful actresses in Hollywood. You excuse yourself to use the restroom. 1 minute passes, 5 minutes, 10, 30 minutes, an hour. When you finally return, your date, understandably, asks what the hell took so long. Your answer: I got ketchup on my pants, had to wash them, waited for them to dry, put them back on, but then I couldn't leave. Why not? I couldn't touch the doorknob. The year is 1947. The man is Howard Hughes, billionaire, aviation pioneer, film producer. One of the most successful people in America, and he just spent 90 minutes trapped in a bathroom because his brain wouldn't let him touch a doorknob. There would be no second date. Today we're talking about a disorder you've probably never heard of. It affects up to 1 in 12 people. It's responsible for some of humanity's greatest achievements, and it destroys the lives of those who have it. Welcome to the Chatterbox. I'm your host, and this is the story of Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder, OCPD, a condition marked by an extensive preoccupation with perfectionism, organization, and control. Cleveland Clinic. Buckle up. This one's going to make you question every successful person you've ever admired. Let's go back to Howard Hughes for a second, because his story is too insane not to unpack. Hughes was known for his eccentric behavior and reclusive lifestyle, behavior that was caused in part by a worsening of Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder, OCD UK. After leaving a Las Vegas hotel in 1966, employees discovered that his drapes had not been opened during the time he lived there and had rotted through OCD UK, likely due to contamination fears. But here's where it gets really dark. Towards the end of his life, Hughes lay naked in bed in darkened hotel rooms in what he considered a germ-free zone, wearing tissue boxes on his feet to protect them. OCD UK. He burned his clothing if someone near him became ill. And here's the kicker: the tragic irony that defines severe OCD. Hughes ended up neglecting his own hygiene later in his life, rarely bathing or brushing his teeth. He stopped cutting the nails on his hands and feet, letting them grow to a grotesque length. OCD UK. When he died in 1976, his body was so thin that observers likened him to a captive from a Japanese prisoner of war camp. OCD UK, the richest man in America. Dead, alone, emaciated, nails like talons, all because his brain got stuck. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's tragic. But what does this have to do with Steve Jobs? Everything. The difference between OCD and OCPD. Before we dive into Steve Jobs, we need to clear something up. Because there's a disorder that sounds almost identical to what Hughes had, but it's fundamentally different. OCD, Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder, versus OCPD, Obsessive-Compulsive Personality Disorder. One letter, completely different lives. Here's the breakdown. OCD is an anxiety disorder in which you have frequent, unwanted, and intrusive thoughts, obsessions, that cause you to perform repetitive behaviors, compulsions. Cleveland Clinic. Think flipping a light switch exactly 7 times, washing your hands until they bleed, checking if you lock the door 50 times before you can leave the house. People with OCD know this is irrational. People with OCD usually are aware that the condition is causing their behavior and accept that they need professional help to treat it. Cleveland Clinic. They want it to stop. It's distressing. It's unwanted. It ruins their day. Now, OCPD? People with OCPD usually have little, if any, self-awareness of their behaviors. Cleveland Clinic. That's the key difference. With OCD, individuals know their thoughts or impulses are not reasonable. With OCPD, patients do their best to hide their insecurities, not just from others, but also from themselves. WebMD. Someone with OCPD doesn't think they have a problem. They think everyone else does. Why can't you idiots see that this is the right way to do things? People with OCPD are highly functioning individuals who are convinced that their way of thinking is absolutely correct, if not superior to everyone else's live science. Someone with OCD may have trouble working at all, because they might spend hours every day scrubbing their hands to make sure they are perfectly clean. That person won't have the energy to start Apple or to fly across the Atlantic live science. But someone with OCPD? They become CEOs, presidents, world champions. OCPD affects 3% to 8% of adults. Cleveland Clinic in the United States. It's the most common personality disorder in the United States and is diagnosed twice as often in males than in females. Wikipedia. And it might be the reason your boss is insufferable. Enter Steve Jobs, February 2013. A guy named Vic Gundotra, senior executive at Google, gets an urgent call from Steve Jobs. Emergency, Jobs says. We need to talk, now. Gundotra panics. Is Google about to be kicked off the iPhone? Is the partnership collapsing? What catastrophe requires the CEO of Apple to personally intervene on a Sunday? Jobs' emergency. The Google icon on the iPhone had the second O in the wrong shade of yellow. Live science. That's it. That was the crisis. A slightly wrong shade of yellow on an icon that millions of people see every day and literally nobody notices. Gundotra later said this story taught him about attention to detail, how it inspired him to care about quality. But let's be real, this is insane. Jobs was the Apple co-founder who built his company's first factory in Fremont, California in 1984, and frequently got down on his hands and knees and looked for specks of dust on the floor, as well as on all the equipment. Live science. Jobs later recalled, "If we didn't have the discipline to keep that place spotless, then we weren't going to have the discipline to keep all these machines running." Live science. He hated typos. Pam Kerwin, the marketing director at Pixar during Jobs' hiatus from Apple, said, "He would carefully go over every document 1,000,000 times and would pick up on punctuation errors such as misplaced commas." Live science. And if anything wasn't perfect, Jobs could throw a fit. He was a difficult and argumentative boss who had trouble relating to others. Live science. One day, Jobs' team worked late into the night. Finally, after exhausting hours, they assembled the first prototype of the Macintosh. They were proud, excited, ready to show the boss their masterpiece. Jobs looked at it. "This is garbage." "What? Why?" "The screws aren't aligned." The screws, inside the computer, that you can't see unless you open the case, that have zero impact on functionality. Jobs made them disassemble the entire machine and start over. Hours of work thrown away for invisible screws. Now, you might say, but that obsession with detail made Apple great. That's why their products are amazing. And you'd be half right. The dark side of genius. Jobs was a typical obsessive, according to author Joshua Kendall, and Apple's leader probably had obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, or OCPD. Live science. There's a research paper titled "The Dark Side of Steve Jobs." It poses a hypothetical. What if Jobs had to go through a standard Fortune 500 CEO assessment process? The conclusion? He'd fail. He'd show up in messy clothes. He'd be arrogant. He'd call his interviewers idiots. He'd trash the company. Jobs couldn't stop designing products. When hospitalized in the ICU, he once ripped off his oxygen mask, insisting that his doctors improve its design slate. Even on his deathbed, he couldn't let imperfection exist. But here's the thing about OCPD that most people don't understand. It often runs in families, but scientists are unclear whether genes, environment, or a combination of these factors are behind the disorder. Live science. What we do know is this. People with OCPD become machines. They don't live, they optimize. Take Jobs' obsession with the next computer in the 1980s after he was forced out of Apple. He wanted to create the perfect computer, and he did. It was a technological masterpiece. It cost $6,500 in 1985, about $17,000 in today's money. Nobody bought it. The company lost over $100 million. Perfectionism doesn't always lead to success. Sometimes it leads to spectacular, expensive failure. And it doesn't just destroy projects, it destroys people. Let's talk about Lisa Brennan Jobs, Steve Jobs' daughter. Jobs denied she was his daughter for years, refused to pay child support, fought her mother in court. When he finally acknowledged her, their relationship was complicated. In her memoir, Small Fry, Lisa describes what it was like to be the daughter of one of the richest men in the world. She lived in a house with broken heating. Jobs refused to fix it. The dishwasher didn't work. Jobs refused to fix it. When Lisa was 9 years old, she asked her father if she could have his Porsche when he was done with it, a childish request. Most parents would laugh, make a joke, move on. Jobs looked at her and said, "You're getting nothing, study mode. Not when you're older. Not, we'll see, nothing." Jobs was such a perfectionist and so focused on his work that he made no time for his family slate. Lisa writes, "If you're someone used to controlling everything and succeeding at everything, and suddenly you find one thing you can't succeed at, being a loving father whose kids love you back, it's hard not to try to push that away from your life." This is what OCPD does. It turns relationships into projects. And when the project doesn't meet specifications, delete it, start over, or just abandon it entirely. Interpersonal relationships often suffer with OCPD. Family members can feel extremely criticized and controlled, which can be frustrating and upsetting, and often lead to conflict. OCD UK. Jobs wasn't unique in this. Ted Williams, the baseball legend who also likely had OCPD, admitted that he was nothing to his own deserted children. All he did was eat, sleep, and practice his swing Scientific American. Thomas Jefferson kept detailed accounts to track every penny he spent Scientific American. Imagine being his kid, asking for allowance. These aren't bad people. They're sick people. Their brains are stuck in a loop. If I'm not perfect, I'm worthless. If I don't control everything, everything will fall apart. And that belief, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why society rewards mental illness. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to talk about. Our society is built to reward OCPD. Think about it. You're a manager. 2 candidates walk in. Candidate A, balanced, takes vacations, has hobbies, leaves work at 5 p.m. to spend time with family. Candidate B works 80-hour weeks, obsesses over every detail, never takes breaks, checks emails at 2 a.m., lives for the job. Who gets promoted? People with OCPD possess enormous drive and persistence and are very detail-oriented. Live science. We don't call them sick, we call them dedicated, passionate, team players. We give them corner offices and 6-figure bonuses, and then we wonder why they're miserable, why their marriages fail, why they die of stress-related heart attacks at 55. OCPD has some of the same symptoms as Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder, OCD. People with OCD have unwanted thoughts, while people with OCPD believe that their thoughts are correct. Wikipedia. That's why treatment is so difficult. You can't convince someone they're wrong when their wrongness has been financially rewarded for 30 years. You're telling me I need therapy? I just made the company $10 million this quarter. And they're not entirely wrong. Some evidence suggests that OCPD may have helped human civilization evolve. A 2012 report presented the ADHD-OCPD theory of human behavior, which states that people with these disorders were critical in the switch from a hunter-gatherer society to an agricultural society. Farmers who were more meticulous and detail-oriented would have been more successful. Live science. Charles Lindbergh, first person to fly solo across the Atlantic, likely had OCPD. His obsession with details and lists led him to create the first pre-flight checklist, an innovation now used in every flight worldwide. Live science. Melville Dewey, the guy who invented the Dewey Decimal System, was obsessed with the number 10. That obsession organized human knowledge. So maybe we need these people. Maybe civilization requires a certain percentage of the population to be unhealthily obsessed with making things perfect. But that doesn't mean we should celebrate their suffering. The addiction to achievement. Here's where OCPD gets really dark. Imagine you're a kid. Your parents' love feels conditional. You only get praised when you achieve something. Straight A's, first place, perfect performance. So you learn. Achievement, love. You internalize it. It becomes your identity. Fast forward 20 years, you're successful, CEO, award winner, respected in your field. But here's the problem. The high doesn't last. You finish a project, feel good for maybe a day, then the emptiness returns. So you start another project, bigger, more ambitious. The rush comes back, briefly, then it fades again. Congratulations, you're now addicted to achievement. And like any addiction, you need bigger doses to feel normal. Scientists call this the reward system dysfunction. With OCPD, repeated compulsive behaviors actually rewire your brain's dopamine pathways. Each achievement gives you a hit of endorphins, the chemicals that make you feel good. But here's the kicker. Over time, you need more and more achievements just to feel baseline normal, not even happy Cypress Creek Hospital. It's like coffee. First cup wakes you up. After years, you need 3 cups just to feel like a functioning human. People with OCPD reach a point where accomplishment doesn't bring joy. It just reduces anxiety. And when they can't achieve, depression, burnout, sometimes suicide. Jobs left Apple in 1985, forced out by his own board because he was impossible to work with. He founded Next, poured everything into making the perfect computer. It failed commercially. He bought Pixar. That actually worked out. But the pattern was always the same. Work, obsess, perfect, achieve, feel empty, repeat. Until finally, in 2011, pancreatic cancer killed him. He was 56 years old. Can it be treated? So here's the question. If OCPD is so destructive, can it be fixed? Yes, sort of. OCPD is one of the most treatable personality disorders. Both medication and psychotherapy, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy, can help Cleveland Clinic. But there's a catch. Treatment only works if the person recognizes they have a problem. Cleveland Clinic. And remember, people with OCPD don't think they're the problem. They think everyone else is. Why would you seek therapy when you're convinced you're right? This is why family members and colleagues suffer. The person with OCPD is a hurricane, leaving destruction in their wake, completely unaware of the damage. And even when they do seek help, their perfectionism makes therapy difficult. I need to be the perfect patient. I need to do therapy perfectly. It becomes another compulsion. Howard Hughes never got treatment. He spiraled deeper into isolation until he died alone, a shell of a human being. Steve Jobs allegedly explored some therapy, but his relationship with his daughter suggests it wasn't enough. The people who do recover, they're the ones who hit rock bottom, who lose everything, who finally realize that their way isn't working. But even then, treatment can be challenging due to the egocentric nature of the disorder, meaning they often don't see their behaviors as problematic. OCD UK. It's a disorder that lies to you, tells you you're special, superior, that your way is the only way. And our culture? It reinforces that lie. Every time we praise workaholics, every time we celebrate people who hustle at the expense of health and relationships, we're telling people with OCPD, you're not sick, you're exceptional. The final question. So let me leave you with this. When you look at successful people, billionaires, CEOs, championship athletes, Nobel Prize winners, ask yourself, is this genius or is this illness? Is this exceptional drive? Or is this a brain malfunction that happens to produce profitable results? And here's the really uncomfortable question. If Steve Jobs had been successfully treated for OCPD in his 20s, would the iPhone exist? If Howard Hughes had gotten therapy for OCD, would modern aviation look the same? If all the obsessive, perfectionistic, control freak founders and inventors throughout history had been cured, where would we be? I don't have an answer. Nobody does. What I do know is this. We shouldn't have to choose between achievement and mental health, between success and happiness, between changing the world and being able to hug your daughter without making it weird. Maybe the real question isn't, how do we cure OCPD? Maybe it's, how do we build a world where people don't have to destroy themselves to be valued? Because right now, we're breeding a generation of Steve Jobs clones. People who work themselves to death, who sacrifice everything for success, who believe their worth is measured in achievements, and we're calling it ambition, when really, for a lot of people, it might just be mental illness with a good PR team. Thanks for watching the Chatterbox. If this made you rethink everything you thought you knew about success, hit that like button. If you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's working themselves to death, someone who can't accept anything less than perfect, someone whose family is suffering because of their dedication, share this video. And if you recognize yourself in this description, please, talk to someone. Therapy isn't weakness, it's maintenance. Subscribe for more deep dives into the uncomfortable truths nobody wants to talk about. I'll see you next time.